Well, as you know, ladies and gentlemen, we will be returning to the lady quite soon. In about 45 minutes, in fact, we will have a panel so big that we'll have to hire another hotel just for the panel alone. But not all of the stations sailed the seas. Some were based on sturdy and not so sturdy towers built as part of Britain's wartime coastal defences. And one such station was Radio City, the Tower of Power, which took over the platform from Radio Such and went on air in September 1964, closing on the 8th of February 1967. So we remember City with the moderator for this panel, who was Britain's youngest DJ at the time he was on City, Bob Le-Roi.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Well, I don't know if we have got microphones working. Well, good afternoon, and such a pleasure to be here. And thank you very much for coming. And thank you to Hans and Martin, and in the memory of Rob, for inviting me to host this panel. A great honour. And I hope through the course of this next 45 minutes or so, we'll uncover one or two of the stories of Radio City and put a few ghosts to bed and have some nice memories of the station. I'd like to start, if I may, with a recording of a dear friend of mine, Paul Elvey, who's in Spain now and is advancing in years. But he was one of the first voices we heard on Radio City, so if our engineer would take cut one away.
It's gone all quiet.
Yes.
You've done it again, haven't you?
Dick,
Just
turn the
talk
transmitter
amongst
on.
yourselves, please.
Shall we come back to that, guys? Oh, Lord. Radio City. Okay, well, you can see we've got a distinguished panel amongst us. A lot of people started on Radio City in the very early days. They stayed for a while. One or two of us came and went. And I think, if I may, I'd like to kick off the conversation with Dick Dixon. Dick was actually a radio ham and has always been a technician. Dick, tell us about your introduction to the Radio City Fort.
I was out of work, but I didn't have any work, and I was listening for a particular record. And so what I was doing, I was switching between Caroline, Atlanta, and Radio Such, that I could just receive in Ramsgate. And on one of these times, I heard Reg advertising for radio technicians. So I thought, I'd go down there on Wednesday and see what it's all about. And I went down on Wednesday, went out to the boat. I was the only one that applied for the job, so I got it. And there was Brian Paul Elvey and myself, which was in June 1964. And then I stayed with... Oh, David Such occasionally came out.
And you'd never really been a presenter or a DJ. That was something that was self-taught, really.
Wasn't even thinking of a job anyway.
Have you got cut one ready for us, guys? Have you got cut one for us?
I'm sorry,
I think they seem to have lost their MP3s. Let me know when you've got some audio for us, will you? Thank you. Okay, other people came, as I said, and were with us a very short time. We have a gentleman who actually joined us. I don't actually remember him being there, but Norman. Norman, your introduction to the station was a little bit of a strange way in and out. You were almost gone in the blink of an eye, weren't you?
I was. Yeah, we can hear that. I'd met Reg Calvert in London, and Reg told me what a wonderful place he had, and he was a lovely bloke, an awful liar, but a lovely bloke. And I went down there, and I only stayed there for, I think, 7 days. Radio City was a good little setup. It was on the fort, which was stable. The living quarters were a little sparse, and the tins of baked beans were always good. But it was different, but they had the right idea, and the guys were all wonderful. And sadly, Reg got murdered not so long afterwards. But it was a good place to be, and it had a big following, around Kent and places like that. It was good.
Ricky, you came to the station, and again, you weren't with Radio City very long. I've just told you a story that you actually shared your name with what was the station manager, used a name similar to yours, Rick Michaels, and he was on very much earlier. But what do you recall about joining City?
Well, I was... can you hear me? Yeah, I was on actually at the London School of Economics over for a year from the States, and had done an interview with Radio Luxembourg, actually for Pi Records. And I'd done some work for Radio Jamaica and Rediffusion in Kingston, Jamaica when I was in boarding school, no less. And the Pi Records producers hired me to do a half-an-hour show, which lasted for about 12 weeks, for Pi Records introducing their new hits. It was all payola on Radio Luxembourg. And Tony Carroll, who you recall was a disc jockey on Radio City, had appendicitis, and he was airlifted off. And I got a call from the producer from Pi Records. They said, listen, these Radio City people want you to go out to the station and fill in for this fellow that's been lifted off. He read about in the newspaper. So I said, why not? I went out there and arrived, and Paul Elvey, the engineer, said, well, you're going to be on this morning because Tony's off. So I said, well, I hope that you've got somebody to run the board and the equipment. He said, well, how could you be on Radio Luxembourg and not do that? And I said, well, listen, Paul, the difference is it's all done in a studio in London. It's all scripted, just like the BBC, and I'm simply a presenter like an actor reading it. So he taught me how to run the board, and I managed to stay with Radio City for about 6 months, and I spent a lot of time with Reg because I became assistant manager on the ground at 7 Denmark Street.
Fantastic. Mike, you were out on the fort too, and you probably found, like the rest of us, that being a DJ was actually probably one of the least of the important jobs. You needed to chip in with just about everything to make the fort work. Do you recall some of the lovely meals you prepared?
Oh, hello, yes, you can hear me. Wonderful. I mean, the beans have been mentioned, so let's not talk about those again. It was rather simple, but I suppose it's, I'm trying to think of the word. We're all sort of, I can't think of, like explorers.
Basic.
Basic. Oh, basic, yeah. A couple of things I do remember, which I was only there for 2 weeks because Mr. Calvert didn't like me, and I had nothing to do with his demise, I should point out. One was if you went to the toilet and pulled the chain. If you walked outside, you could see it before it hit the sea, because it just went through the floor. And what was rather nice was to see the pin-ups that the military guys had stuck on the walls, because it was a military fort. Pictures of Betty Davis and that sort of thing, black and white in swimming suits. So that was sort of gave you a little bit of déjà vu. And the exciting thing was getting aboard,
yes,
which was a sort of like, if you can imagine a pallet, and you all stood on this pallet, and it was towed up with a winch. How high was it? About 50 metres?
About 60 feet, yeah.
60 feet. 20 metres, so that's the way you got on board, and I had a broken arm, which made it just a little bit more difficult. And am I allowed to say one more thing?
Yes, do,
Mr.
please.
Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is a French documentary was made about Radio City in 1966-67, black and white. So if anyone's interested, they can see it. There's a link to it on my website, mike-hayes.com. And they interview Mrs. Calvert, and they go out of the fort. So if any of you would like to see that, it's worth looking at.
Okay, let's go back to the audio. I think our guys have mended the audio. Let's go back to Paul Elvey, Radio Such in June 64.
Hello, testing. This is Radio Such on 197 metres. I'm sorry for that short break in transmission, ladies and gentlemen, but I just noticed something, and I have to attend to it right now. One of the big output coils is trying to burn up. Now, I can soon put that right, but I'm afraid I'll have to leave you, so I'll put an LP on. If we do go off the air, it'll only be for about half a minute, okay? So I'm going to leave you in the very capable hands of the coasters, and the first track is Poison Ivy.
Interesting thing about Paul Elvey was that he was on the fort on his own for 2 weeks with a petrol generator, turntables with a 7-inch platter, and all the aerial and feed in front of him. It was a very, very archaic setup indeed. So let's go a little bit further forward. One of the things about Radio City that suffered immensely, more so than any other station other than perhaps Radio Essex, was the amount of generator plant. And because of the lack of power, the signal was always curtailed. by lack of generation. And we started off with a petrol generator, and then a couple of listers went out onto the fort, which were very good, but again, they didn't quite give us the power we needed. When Ross and the other guys came aboard, things were a little bit more settled. Reg was always a guy for ideas and enterprise, and the whole concept of Radio Such was really a publicity stunt. It was never really going to be a radio station. And one of the things that he did, he turned his mind to alternative ideas. And one of them was my good friend Martin Green, who was a Dutchman. And Reg decided that it would actually be quite nice to have a Dutchman on board. So Martin, in your own words, how did you actually come to join Radio City?
English, Dutch.
A little bit of both, if you can.
Well, no, I was nothing but a listener to the English radio stations like Caroline and Radio City. One time I was listening to the station and I heard an announcement that they need a DJ. Oh, I thought, why not? So I wrote to Radio City. I got back a letter from make a tape, a trial tape. I did. And then I get the answer. It passed standard, so I could come to it for a trial period for 4 days, which I did. First time I went to England. First time I went abroad, in fact. And I was there as a 20 years old student, because I was a student. For the first time behind a mic like this. Never did it before. And I was there with Paul Elvey, the one we heard just a minute ago. And together we were there 2 weeks because the weather was that bad that the tender couldn't go to Vetsus. So 2 weeks there with Paul Elvey, who was my teacher, who was my cook, who was
engineer,
who was DJ, and then I learned 2 weeks to be a DJ there.
And you became very popular. You got quite a lot of mail. It was amazing that it took off. Everyone liked you too, I have to say.
Because my English is lousy, of course. and yes, and that's what the English people liked.
Yes,
at that moment, because I got
mix.
loads and loads of letters.
Good mix. One thing about Radio City, of course, it didn't worry about being too parochial and local. So if we can play cut 2, you'll hear a commercial recorded by Eric Martin, who was the station manager.
Visit Wheeler's Oyster Bar when in Whitstable, the oldest oyster bar in Great Britain. Oysters a speciality, the famous Whitstable natives when in season. The finest seafoods available every day of the year.
And those jingles were recorded on domestic tape recorders in the Record Centre, which was a record centre and a card shop, and had record booths along the side, which you can see on my website, and I'm sure you have. Now, 1965 was where it all started to happen for Radio City. It was a very fast and furious year. Dick is not going to thank me for playing a clip of him, but Dick Dixon from 1965, cut 3.
The little girl with the great big voice, Lulu, with her record called That's Really Some Good. Do you know why? Herman does.
Dick Dixon, circa 1965. The point about Radio City was that a lot of listeners did tune in because it was local, and things were changing quite rapidly. We had a lot of people come and go, and Ross came out for a short time. Ross, you came comparatively late to the venture, didn't you? But how did you get to us?
Well, I'd been working in 2XL Cooma on a breakfast program, and Cooma's at the time was a huge country town because Australia was building a Snowy Mountains hydroelectric scheme, and they had 27 countries represented, and I got a taste of Europe, and I thought I'll come to Europe. So I booked a one-way passage on a Italian cruise liner and ended up in London in Kangaroo Valley, and went looking for a job in pirate radio. I went to Radio London, and Radio Caroline, and they put me on the wait list, and somebody said Radio City are interested in DJs, so I found out that they had an office in Denmark Street in Tin Pan Alley in London, And I got sent down to speak to the owner, Dorothy, who was not well at the time, and I called around at the house and I got shown upstairs and told that she was waiting in bed for me. So I went in and I thought, well, maybe I'm going to get this job. And she said to me, sit down on the bed, Ross. And I sat on the bed and she said, how long have you been in radio? And I gave her an idea of the things I'd done. And she said, oh, that sounds very good. I think we can use you. And I said, that's good. Pack your bag and be down at Whitstable in Kent for the tender boat. So that's how I arrived at Radio City.
Ross doesn't look like a pin-up, does he? He really doesn't. But he did become a pin-up, which is quite a strange story. Ross, you were actually the model for the Radio City Tower Powered T-shirt.
Exactly, yes. I happened to be in the Denmark office when I think it wasn't so much of me being a pin-up as just being Johnny on the spot. The T-shirts arrived and they needed to have a press photo of the T-shirts done, so I was commandeered to do it, and that's how I ended up being the model for the T-shirt.
Ever since?
Ever since.
Ever since. Okay, I'm not too proud. I'll play a cut from myself. This is March 1965, and this was actually the very, very first programme that I did live on the Fort. So this is cut number 4.
This is Bob Le-Roi here, spinning some records for you. The time now is 25 minutes to 8 o'clock. 25 minutes to 8 o'clock. Well, here's the ladies from the Rolling Stones. And if this one doesn't make the number 1 spot, I'll eat my headphones. It's The Last Time from the Rolling Stones. Well, I must go now, because the time is coming up to 20 to 8. And my last record is Yes I Will from the Hollies. Well, I'm sorry to say that the Hollies are not going to have time to finish Yes I Will for tonight, because Radio City is closing down until tomorrow morning. So this is Bob Le-Roi and everyone else on Radio City saying good night. Good night. Well, more of us here on the Fortress, the shimmering sun. It's good night until tomorrow morning.
I think you can fade that. So that was March 65, and pretty diabolical, and you might have known that I was Bob Le-Roi in those days, and people ask why. Because my name is French, they couldn't pronounce it in England, and that's as simple as that. But I am Bob Le-Roi, so there you go. 1965 is also the start of ads made by Terry King at the King's Agency, Tin Pan Alley, as Ross was saying. And Reg had a number of bands under his guise for some years, package tours around the UK from around 1963, and Screaming Lord Sutch, probably his most successful act at the time, was out there amongst them. But he used to utilise his groups in a fantastic way. He'd take a guy who could play guitar in one group and put him in another, so he ended up with 5 groups with basically the same lineup but slightly jigged around to work for record recordings and gigs. But he also asked everybody to do more than their fair share of work, and he got the groups to record some of the jingles. This cut, number 5, is the Fortunes doing a heated hair roller for Carmen.
I grabbed the chance. My hair looks such a mess. Oh, don't worry about that. Put on that super dress quickly, and this time you can borrow my heated hair roller. You mean your new Carmen Thermo rollers? Yes, I'll show you how to use them.
Switch on to Carmen Thermo rollers now, and in a while your hair's a style. Heated rollers by Carmen, yeah.
So undistinct, very distinctively the Fortunes there in that commercial. Very interesting stuff too. Possibly at the wrong speed. And talking hair rollers and glamour, Reg was always one to jump on the publicity side of things. And one lady who won a beauty competition in her hometown in Essex, I believe it was Rayleigh, Romford in Essex, I thought it was Rayleigh, so I do beg your pardon, was a lady called Linda. But it didn't suit being called Linda, so Linda became Peggy Knight and was appearing all over newspapers across the UK as the first glamour lady DJ. Do you remember those days, Lynn? Are you on?
Am I on?
I'm sure you are. That's it.
Now I am.
So how did it happen?
I won a competition, and then I did quite a few bits and pieces with films and things, and then Reg actually contacted me and suggested that I do a sound test to see about doing DJing for Radio City, which was good publicity for me and very good publicity for him. And so that's how that began. And he suggested that I did used to record in Denmark Street, and then he said, right, we're going out to the fort. And I'm very surprised to hear there was a pallet, because I didn't have that. We went out and it was a raging gale, which fortunately I'm no good in calm water, so I was okay with the gale. But then getting there, they couldn't do the pallet, so Reg very, brightly said, we'll winch you up. So they put a hoist around me, and I said, well, it's a little bit high and it's a pretty rough. So he said, you can do it, it's fun, it's good publicity. So that's what we did, and I was being swung in and out for the fort, and I thought, well, these are my last moments. And but they weren't, and thank God not. And it's really lovely to be here today and to see a lot of faces that I haven't seen for very many years, and I won't say how many, but thank you.
Thank you for coming, pleasure. Ricky, the skills that people had on the fort, they were very versatile. You had to chip in with everything, as we always said, much more so on smaller stations. But I don't think many people would realise that quite often Radio City survived with a minimum of 3 people on board, and that wasn't unusual, and costs were always very difficult, not much money about. But do you remember some of the odd tasks you got asked to do?
Well, I like everybody else out there, had to pitch in, cook, virtually everything except one thing, and that was not touch the transmitters because too many people might have been electrocuted. So other than that, we did just about virtually everything. And when we ran into trouble, one of the things that will come up and that people remember for Radio City, if there was any real bad trouble out there, we'd play the Fortunes, You've Got Your Troubles for Uncle Reg. And they'd be looking to send somebody out to give us a helping hand, except for the checks, of course.
Keeping clean on the forts was very interesting. It was a long time before anyone thought of the idea of bringing out sea soap. And sea soap is a pretty awful substance. It's fairly carbolic and lots of grain and grit in it. Dick, you're probably best to talk about the sea salt and how we used to wash. It was pretty awful, wasn't it?
I can't actually remember washing. I must have done. There's the fact the same as going to the toilet. I can't remember that either. And sea soap. Can you remember sea soap?
No, I can't.
You don't remember it?
Remember soap.
Bars of carbolic soap.
No,
horrible stuff.
It was like a detergent.
Yeah.
Like Le-Roi.
Yeah.
In fact, they brought out because that would lather in seawater.
Yeah.
But I can't remember sea soap.
The sea soap came out in blocks. Horrible stuff. Shocking. World War II stuff. Okay, King's Agency, Terry King was a promotion guy in Timpan Alley, as we said, and a lot of the groups came on. And listening back to some of the programmes, you often would hear songs that you just wouldn't recognise. And I played back some programmes ready for Red Sands Radio this year, and some of it we can't use because the songs are so obscure, but quite strange. Another guy that came out, a good mate of ours, Dick knows him very well, and recently we've met up. He lives now abroad, but Cliff Cattell. You don't often hear him, but I've uncovered a tape from 1965, April time. That's cut number 6.
I do love you with all my
heart. The Hawaiian wedding song with Julie Rogers. Well, we've just had Alex come into the studio here and our engineer, and they're looking out the window and looking towards Whitstable and just commenting on what a remarkably good day it is. Aren't you, chaps?
Definitely.
Thank you. Let's see. Yes, a Jet Harris and Tony Meehan one.
I think that's it. But there you go. It shows you the sort of programmes that were going out from the station, big gaps for the songs to come in. Basically, I forget who reminded me, but we didn't actually use slip mats. It was crazy. A pair of SP25s, record went on, queued it up, away it went, waited till it got to the song introduction. And talking over the introductions of songs was something that was very rarely done. Programmes became quite interesting, and I'm not really quite sure who came up with the idea of the Anti-City show, Dick. Are you?
Crisscross.
Crisscross, was it? Yeah. We had a show called Anti-City, and it was quite popular, but it was people... It got to the point, I think, where they were damning the programmes and the presenters and taking a personal dislike, but we used to play these tapes, and it got to the point where they were constantly complaining about the technical problems, and so it became a programme called Feedback, which was feedback on just about anything. But interesting times all the same. Linda was saying about Essex. Well, Essex featured quite... as a priority. We had the Basildon Record Request Show, and talking Crisscross, as we just did a moment ago. Cut number 7.
Come on, Papa's got a brand new bag. James Brown and the Famous Flames. 10 minutes to 10 now on Radio City. That's the Basildon Request Show running right through until 11 o'clock. Remember, every Sunday morning it is 9:30 until 11. Would you play for my granddad who thinks the Rolling Stones are the greatest? Satisfaction. Well, nice to hear that one or two granddads like the Rolling Stones, I must say. And this comes with love from granddaughter Amanda, who, it says, thinks her granddad is the greatest. You don't say, Amanda, who your granddad is. You don't even give an address, which is rather unfortunate. Anyway, I hope granddad is listening right now.
A lot of these recordings are actually studio recordings and not off air. There was a lot of pre-recorded material made because of so few people being on the station, and it wasn't unusual if a tender came out for someone to go on the air for 15 minutes with a pre-recorded show, and Dick and myself and Chris and just about everybody used to make a tape that could go on for crew changes and what have you. So it wasn't unusual to hear that. Money was always tight on the station. It was one of those things that that we never really got very much by way of advertising, and like most of the offshore stations, the religion actually paid quite a princely amount of money and kept the radio station on the air. Dick and I were recalling one of the times when the tape actually jammed and it was spewing tape from the take-up reel onto the floor. But Dick, we actually kept the programme going, didn't we?
That was the Garner Ted Armstrong, was it? Yes,
that's right.
It's running at 15 inches a second, and when you see this thing shooting off without the takeoffs all, it was going straight the way across the side of the studio. Well, I opened the door and there was tape everywhere. It
Amazing.
was incredible. But it because of the fact that it was still running, it ran right the way through.
We had to promote the idea of putting on a second transmitter. Could we quickly play cut number 9?
Good afternoon to you. If you've just tuned into Radio City, broadcasting on 299 metres, and in 25 minutes Radio City open up the 188 metre transmitter. So if you haven't tried 188, we'll be giving you the exact starting time of that transmitter a bit later on, and you can try it out for yourself.
We had a COSOR transmitter and a GC transmitter came out, and Reggie's idea was that the other transmitter would fill in the gaps in London where we weren't reaching, and this was to actually promote religion. So at 6 o'clock every day, the religious programming came out on that transmitter, which was quite an interesting thing. Can we play, just to remind people that things did move on a little bit more, cut number 10?
Tower of Power.
So 299, the mighty Tower of Power, by then getting much better, much more proficient, sounding a little bit more professional, a few more people on board. Mike, you have something to add to that?
No, not to that. It's just a general thing, which I've discovered not many people know. It wasn't one fort. How many were there? 4 forts or 3 forts?
There were 6 forts and
6
Shivering
forts,
Sands.
in fact. And they were joined by these narrow bridges, air bridges, from fort to fort, which you had to cross when you wanted to go and use the sea soap or the loo or whatever. So that made it quite, a little bit exciting.
Yeah, we didn't actually use all the forts, but of the 5, because one had got knocked down, there was one separated the searchlight tower, but 5 towers and 2 actually in use. Yes, it was actually quite good. Let's go to the 5x4 show. Do you remember any of that, Norman, the 5x4 show?
No, I don't. I'm sorry.
It was the Beatles and Stones show.
No, I really don't remember very much of it at all. That's not because I'm old. I can hear you people down the back. It's not true. I'm only 61 and a few months, like 120 of the bloke.
Okay, let me ask Martin this, because I know you were there one stage when the studio was actually being rebuilt round you, which was interesting, wasn't it?
It was very nice, yes.
New turntables going in as the shows were going out.
Yes.
Yeah. But do you remember the 5x4 show?
I know it, exactly. The 5x4 show was very popular. The Beatles and Stones. It was every day from, I thought it was
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock until a quarter past. It was only 15 minutes, yes.
Shall we hear a bit of 5x4, track number 11?
Yes.
And there we go, one of the most popular numbers from the Aftermath LP, featuring the sound of the fabulous Stones there, and Out of Time. 299. How are you, Alan Clark, at the 5x4 program? Your Tower of Power. Yes, indeed, time to say a very good afternoon right now to some people in Crawley and Sussex. In fact, at 27 Shepherd Close, Southgate, Crawley and Sussex, play any thing from the Beatles' first LP for Gene Chandler of Shooters Hill, Mr. Mac something or other of Belgium. Oh, lots of strange people on this one, and your friends in Holland. I just can't decide to the signature. I think it's E. Barton, all right? And Linda Davis also, 68 Aston Street, Stepney, London East 14. This one goes out to Paul, John, George and Ringo, and those 4 names ring a bell. Can't quite think where, though. And I'd also like to include Madeline Grant of the Eastwood High School and former teacher Mrs. Light, is it? Very bright woman, maybe. Yeah, all right. Well, we've had a track from the brand new Revolver LP. Right now we go back to that very first history-making LP on Polydor, a track that hasn't been heard so far on the 5x4 program. Tony Sheridan and the Beatles sing the song.
So there it is, Alan Clark, 5x4, as Martin said, one of the very most popular shows on the Fort, and had a tremendous following. And of course it was in the days when people used to write letters, and we had staggering amounts of mail, and now letters to radio stations are very scarce indeed. Text and emails, perhaps, if you're lucky. It's an instant world, but how it's changed. Programs themselves, there were a few innovations going on, but behind the scenes, Reg Calvert was looking to try and make some money from his enterprise, and a lot of people don't realise that he'd actually made inroads to using an alternative fort to bringing back a different radio station, having sold either Radio City to Radio Caroline or to Radio London, a relay for the Project Atlanta group, or UKGM, the United Kingdom Good Music Station, to Radio London, and all the shenanigans that went on there. But he did dispatch a number of people across to the Knock John fort. He went himself, he took Cliff Cattell and a couple of other people, Jerry Pitcher, who has made a very nice picture, if you've not seen it, that's for sale here today, a very unique picture of the forts to mark this event. So he was looking at putting another radio station on that tower. I have to come back to Dick again because he was slightly involved with this. Dick, what was your memories about going across to Knock John? You didn't actually go yourself, I don't believe, in that first instance.
Nothing to do with me whatsoever. Now, we were supposed that Reg was going to sell City to either Radio Caroline or London and open up City 2. So I went out there with the generators and the transmitter, but Roy Bates wanted it. So as he was intent on taking the tower, I thought I'd let him have it.
And walk away.
And when I came back to City, Reg said, well, so I left.
And went and joined Radio Essex.
There wasn't any fight at all.
No.
In fact, but he was a very determined man, and when he was climbing up a boom that was on this rickety old dolphin that was falling apart down there and just resting on the fort, and he must have climbed up about 20 feet, and I thought, if you're going to do that, and he's a big man,
let him have it.
If you're going to do that, you can have it.
Yeah,
I'm not going to fight for it.
Well, we're not here to talk about the death of pirate radio. There are a lot of people being blamed over the years. Perhaps Reg was in some way a catalyst, but behind the scenes at pirate radio, I've always held the view that there were a lot of shenanigans going on at all the stations, and it was going to go down, whatever. It was a great time. It was a brilliant time. We all enjoyed it immensely, but there was a distinct lack of money for all the forts, and even Radio 390, that was the most successful of the fort-based stations, actually ran out of money because of the legalities of trying to maintain that station towards the very bitter end. Let's hear some alternative programming. This is cut number 12 with Ian Mcrae.
We welcome back to the Auntie Mabel Hour, Swaying Radio Works Up. Swaying Radio Works Up. From the north, east, west, and south, this is Radio Works Up News. Live and up to the minute. This is Bang Bang Brannigan reporting in the public convenience. Dateline Bin Jung. A visiting American tourist claimed yesterday that he had been savagely...
Now, that show was never scripted. It was completely off the cuff. And one evening, and in fact, it's quite strange, I've actually found the original recordings that were made in the transmitter room of a station that Alan and Ian called Radio 310, which was a complete takeoff of Radio 390, and is hilarious. So we have that to present to you at some time in the future. Interesting thing that happened when the radio station closed down after the 299 programs had ceased towards midnight, towards the end of things. The same frequency was left open for the engineers to talk about the things that they needed. So this is cut number 13.
Well, just a general reinforcing all-rounders thing. Pipe cleaners are important. Not necessarily, but they're important to not to the welfare so much as the well-being of senior engineer, and if you follow the trend, it all goes to keep the station running. 100 guards, of course, I'll have those when I come off, provided Phil returns, then I shall come off. Failing that, I shall stay on. 100 Nelson. Paul. Yeah. 100 Nelson.
I think that's enough of that. So there you are. That was the 299 transmitter used to call for supplies and what have you. We're getting very close to the end of this, but it's been brilliant being here. I want to ask everybody for a lasting memory of Radio City or Radio Such, and we'll start with the glamour puss at the end. Sorry, I'm not being funny. I just thought it'd be a nice little pun for Linda, as was Peggy Knight. Your lasting memory.
Oops. Hello. Yes.
Hello.
Oh, haven't been called a glamour puss for years. Thank
there you are.
Yes. It was great fun. That's all I can say. It was far too short. It would have been really great to have continued. Reg was a smashing bloke, and he hit a very tragic end. And that ended my little career as a DJ, as a pirate DJ too. So I have a lot to thank him for, and it was a good time.
But you did it.
I did it.
Norman, you went on to other things, and you did very well and had a very successful career. But I guess you could say, in a way, in the UK, you cut your teeth on the fort.
Yeah, I did. And the one thing that I remember was going out on that very first day with Reg Calvert, and it was that rough that the tender couldn't come alongside again, and I was stuck halfway up the ladder. But I went up there, nobody knew who I was, I didn't know who they were, but they made me so very, very welcome. Radio City was a great little place, and it was a lot of fun, and the people made it that way.
Thank you, Norman. Ricky, what was your lasting memory?
Well, I enjoyed working with people like Alex D and Chris Cross, Johnny Futch, and the whole crowd, yourself out there. But I think the impact on the commercial impact of commercial radio on the record business is something that I remember because it was massive. Notwithstanding the music unions were against it, but the impact on music was phenomenal and carried on. So I was proud to be part of that. 20 years later, I got involved in, if you can imagine this, launching rap and hip hop music. Somebody talked about hip hop music with Chris Blackwell of Island Records, and we launched it in something called The Box, which lived on here in Holland for quite a number of years.
Thank you. For you, Martin, what was your biggest memory? Probably getting to the fort.
My memory is the first time I was there. It was so new for me. Never been to a studio, never been after the microphone. Well, it was a start for me for everything I did after that in my career. That was the first day there where it started.
Excellent.
And it was so nice to work with Dick Dixon, Alexander D, Paul Elvey. Great.
Fantastic, thank you. Mike, what about you?
Radio City was my introduction to pirate radio. I'd worked in radio before in Aden, but this was, the music was great. You're actually, you're doing the board yourselves. Great crowd of people. One name I remember, Tatty Tom Edwards, He was quite a character, as some of you may remember. And yeah, that's where I sort of cut my teeth on pirate radios. Didn't stay there very long and went on to another station later. But very fond memories of the fort.
We're going to have to cut you there because there's a couple of clips we need to pay.
Yeah, sure.
Just, Dick, for you have so many memories, and we've made a documentary together. So tell us briefly, what was your longest lasting memory of the fort?
I think it was just the fun I had and all the people I met. It really was. I didn't do it for a job. I like playing records and I like meeting all the guys. I suppose it was our national service. Far more fun.
Our own national service. That's a good way of putting it. What about you, Russ?
Well, I think it was the collection of guys that were on the station. They were great fun to work for. Adrian Love and Tom Edwards and Ian Mcrae, Alan Clark. They were really great guys, and it was fun working there. Even though it was sparse conditions, I don't think anyone really were worried about the conditions because everyone was enjoying themselves so much. It was a tremendous period of time.
Okay, thank you very much. Wolf Byrne on cut 14, please.
Isn't that beautiful, that number? I think it's probably must be the best number of this year so far. Anyway, you're still all cuddled up there, all you young people there, and you not so young ones as well, are you? Well, here's a fact for you that might keep you amused for a while.
Ladies and gentlemen, do you realize that every 15 seconds during the Wolf Byrne program, somewhere in China, a baby is born?
Wolf Byrne from 1966. That's just about it from us. I will remind you that we do have these very limited edition posters that we've produced and some mugs. I don't want to drag them all the way back to Whitstable to sit looking at the fort. Please buy them from us. Get rid of them. The guy who's produced them is Jerry Pitcher. They're available. Thank you so much to all the guests on the panel. It's been a pleasure to get so many of them together again. And we haven't been together for years, and it really makes me feel very humbled. And so thank you, guys and girls, for being here. Really enjoyed it. I'm going to say goodnight to you. I'm going to let Radio City sign us out. This is cut number 15. Thank you.
On Radio City, ladies and gentlemen, it's exactly 12 midnight, so from Alan Clark.
Well, what can you say? Simply goodbye and many thanks to everyone. I've enjoyed my spell on Radio City and keep in touch, okay?
Paul Kramer.
Thank you, Tom. I'd like to say a very good night to everybody and thank them for a most enjoyable 10 months, and I hope that the listeners do something anyway to get us back on the air, because tomorrow morning, when you switch on, there'll be nothing on 299.
RWB.
Thanks very much, Tom, Paul, Alan, Ian, and everyone. I've had a great time. I've learned a terrible lot about what people can do under extreme conditions, and I've really enjoyed myself. I'm looking forward to something in the future. I don't know what at this stage. And for me, it's bye.
Ian Mcrae.
Well, just goodbye and good morning, and thanks for everything from the past. Been wonderful listeners. Without sounding too sentimental here, all the best of luck to you, and goodbye for now. We'd like to, just very quickly if I can here, Tom, perhaps, I know the other stations are listening to us right now. We'd like to sort of pass on any sort of goodbye messages. We'll listen to them after we go off the air in a few minutes' time, okay? So,
fine.
Bye for now.
Right, well, many thanks indeed to all the lads, and of course our two technicians on duty at the moment, Graham, and also to Phil, and also our two DJs on shore at the moment, Adrian and Eric, and our other technicians, Bill and Ian West. For me, Tom Edwards, for the very last time on Radio City, it's a very good night to you, ladies and gentlemen. God bless, and thank you for being a marvellous audience. Good night, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Bob, thank you, and thank you all for standing up for the national anthem. That was unexpected. It occurs to me that some year we ought to have a pirate radio convention purely for the ladies who appeared on the radio. It is possible, of course, that it might be quite a short convention. There was Linda and there was Kathy Spence, and of course there were the Laserettes. Yeah, that's about it, really. But we could do something about that someday. Might be interesting. I love the story about the Garner Ted Armstrong tape being spooled onto the floor. I was once on duty at Scottish Television when we did the same thing with an episode of The Odd Couple. and we actually, in order to keep the film running on the screen, somebody had to grab the end of the film and go running down the corridor, pulling it after them, and they ended up halfway down Hope Street. There's a true story.